Swinging Sixties, a look back at the cultural and political revolutions. Presentation overview. Political landscape of the 60s. The 60s was a decade of political upheaval, marked by the civil rights movement and the Vietnam War. We'll explore the impact of these events on American society and the world. Shifting societal norms. The 60s was a decade of shifting societal norms marked by youth rebellion that challenged traditional gender roles. We'll examine the impact of this rebellion on American culture and society. Cultural revolution of the era. The 60s witnessed the cultural revolution from the music and arts to the fashion and design. We'll delve into the cultural challenges of the era and their influence on American and global culture. The politics of change, civil rights movement. The civil rights movement was a crucial event that occurred in the 60s, in which African Americans fought for their rights and equality. It led to the abolition of many discriminatory laws and played a significant role in shaping modern America. Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was a significant event that occurred in the 60s, leading to a massive number of deaths and shaping the political landscape of America. It sparked protests and led to many anti-war movements. Activism and change. 60s was a time of significant change and activism, with people fighting for their rights and rebelling against unjust laws and practices. It led to the emergence of new social movements and played a significant role in shaping modern America. Civil rights movement. Key figures. The civil rights movement was led by many key figures, such as Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, Malcolm X, and John Lewis, who fought tirelessly for equal rights. Events of the movement. The civil rights movement was marked by many significant events, such as the Montgomery bus boycott, the March on Washington, and the Selma to Montgomery March, which helped to raise awareness of racial injustice and inspired change. Lasting impact. The civil rights movement had a lasting impact on American society, bringing about significant changes in legislation, social attitudes, and the lives of millions of people. Vietnam War. Causes of the war. The Vietnam War was a result of several factors, including the Cold War, the spread of communism, and the desire to contain it. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was also a major factor in the escalation of the conflict. Consequences of the war. The Vietnam War had significant consequences both for Vietnam and the United States. It resulted in the loss of lives, extensive damage to infrastructure, and political instability. The war also marked the end of the United States' dominance in global affairs. Anti-war movement. The Vietnam War met with widespread opposition, and the anti-war movement in the United States was one of the largest social movements in the country's history. It led to protests, demonstrations, and civil disobedience, ultimately contributing to the end of the war. Shifting society. The 60s was a decade of significant social change, with shifting attitudes towards gender roles and a youth rebellion that challenged traditional norms. This era saw the rise of civil rights movements, feminism, and the anti war movement, and paved the way for modern social movements. Gender roles, feminist movement. Feminist movement of the 60s was a significant social and political movement that aimed to secure women's rights and greater gender equality. It was led by key figures such as Betty Friedan, Gloria Steinem, and Shirley Chisholm. Women's liberation. The 60s saw a significant shift in gender roles as women fought for greater equality. The women's liberation movement challenged traditional notions of gender roles and paved the way for greater opportunities for women in the workplace, education, and politics. Youth rebellion, counterculture movement. The counterculture movement of the 60s was a youth rebellion that rejected the conservative values of the past and embraced new forms of expression, including music, art, and fashion. Hippies. Hippies were a subculture of the counterculture movement that embraced peace, love, and freedom. They rejected mainstream society and created their own alternative communities. Anti establishment protests. Anti establishment protests were a major component of the counterculture movement. These protests were aimed at challenging the established political and social order and promoting social justice. Cultural revolution. Music revolution. The music of the 60s was a major cultural force and saw the rise of rock and roll, folk, and psychedelic music. Key figures of the era include the Beatles, Bob Dylan, and Jimi Hendrix. Art and design revolution. The 60s was a time of experimental art and design, with bold colors and innovative forms. Key figures of the era include Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, and fashion designer Mary Quant. Fashion and style revolution. The 60s saw a major shift in fashion and style, with youth-oriented clothing and the rise of the miniskirt. Key figures of the era include Twiggy, Karen Barney, street and fashion designer Yves Saint Laurent. Music and art. Music of the 1960s. The 1960s saw a new wave of music that challenged the status quo and gave voice to a generation. Key figures and movements included the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and the emergence of psychedelic rock. Art of the 1960s. The 1960s saw a flourishing of creativity in art with new forms of expression that challenged traditional norms. Key figures and movements included Andy Warhol, pop art, and the emergence of psychedelic art. Fashion and design. Mode fashion. Mode fashion was a major trend in the 60s, characterized by bold colors, geometric shapes, and short haircuts. Key designers of the era included Mary Quant and André Coulgray. Psychedelic art. Psychedelic art was a popular trend in the 60s, characterized by bright colors, swirling designs, and surreal imagery. Key designers of the era included Wes Wilson and Victor Moscoso. Conclusion. The Civil Rights Movement. The Swinging Sixties was a decade of profound civil rights change in America that had an impact on world history. This movement helped to end racial discrimination, segregation, and inequality in the United States. Counterculture Revolution. The counterculture revolution of the 60s was a cultural and social phenomenon that challenged societal norms and values, leading to a more liberal and free spirited society. Innovation and spirit of rebellion. Swinging Sixties was marked by a spirit of rebellion and innovation that continues to inspire us today. The era saw the rise of new music, fashion, arts, and technology that transformed society and paved the way for future generations. Thank you.